Hello and welcome. Today, I'm joined by Chad Main, the founder of Percipient and the voice behind the Technically Legal podcast. Chad has spent over a decade helping in-house legal departments to solve their biggest headache, managing high-volume, repetitive tasks through smart mix of technology and human-in-the-loop expertise. We are going to dive into his shift from LA music business to litigation, fear against the hype spectrum of AI law, and how he uses his own podcast as a engine for the firm's growth. Chad, welcome to the Growth Switch.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Our pleasure. Now, your journey into the legal world started on practically a dare from your friend when you were deciding what to do with your career. Do you want to tell the story of how you got into the space?
Yeah, sure. So I went to college in Colorado in the early 90s. Political science degree. I was actually working at the legislature at the time. Part of me thought that I was going to go into politics, but by that point in my life, I figured out that just wasn't for me. Although I could have gone that route, didn't really have options at that point. So I was talking to a buddy of mine, must have been late my junior year. He said, "Man, you should go to law school." I'm like, "Oh, okay." And I did. And that's pretty much all the thought I put into it before I went to law school. Not that I would recommend that to everybody, but that's what happened.
Now, what did it do for your drive for the entrepreneurship and business? Were you happy with the options, or did you have an itch to do something outside of law?
No, not really. No, I had no itch to do anything. And that's like, well, I got a good degree for it. I like the law as an idea. But again, at that time, when I'm 20, 21 years old, I have no real clue of what it means to be a lawyer other than what I see on TV. And obviously, working at the legislature, which I was doing at the time, the state legislature, I mean, there's a lot of lawyers there. But again, that's a whole different kind of legal practice than the guy down the street doing domestic law or litigation or doing contracts.
Was there somebody in particular who was a big influence to your later career, a mentor or somebody that made an impact?
Yeah, probably there was the guy by the name of Curtis Smith. He's in Denver. He's a retired attorney now, but I met him he was my buddy's dad's lawyer, and he took me on during one of the summers. And I think that's probably, now that I think back about it, is probably where I started to get that entrepreneurial bug, is because he had done this himself, threw out his own shingle, and he just trusted me. I think the first summer I was there, I wrote an appellate brief, which I think he pretty much filed with some edits. So I saw, oh, you know what? I don't have to go the big law route, although eventually at some point did. But I could do this. I could start my own business, and that's how I ended up in LA, actually, because I figured out that I didn't want to practice law. He would have given me a job. I could have gone back to Denver and worked, but I want to get in the music business. I'm a music guy. I love it, and so I moved out to LA, managed some bands, started a label.
Mm-hmm.
That's entrepreneurial right there. But to do that, to pay the bills until the other stuff came around, I was using my law degree to do litigation. Was a lot of litigation at the time. But yeah, so I think it probably started with Kurt, and then figured out that I could do this.
I think oftentimes in the conversation it comes up that the law school doesn't teach you the business of law and doesn't teach the business aspect. Not enough mention probably goes into how the law degree is helpful about thinking for other areas of life. So you mentioned that you used the degree and experience you had in the music business. What were some of the skill sets that came in handy in that area?
To be other than like reading contracts and doing the research, and obviously I had to learn all the music law when I got out of school. There was no music law class in the law school I went to in Northern Indiana. Go back to your point about business. I had to learn everything myself. When you're a 25-year-old kid, 26-year-old kid, you don't know anything. I mean, other than probably reading contracts and understanding like how to research law, which obviously came in handy, not necessarily well, I guess it did for the music business too, but the litigation work I was doing to pay the bills, I mean, it taught me that, but the business aspect, no. I highly anybody I talk to is talking about law school. Number one, I tell them you gotta be totally into it, because it's no small feat, especially now it's so expensive. And number two, don't sleep on the business aspects. You're gonna have to learn that on your own, probably. Although I think law schools are getting better nowadays at providing those business classes.
So tell us what happened afterwards. You went to LA to explore the music, and you wanted to focus on that. What basically happened after that?
What happened to that? So, I did okay, managed some bands. We got one band signed to a major label. We were doing okay. Legally, what I was doing, that was actually related to music business. At the time, I represented a lot of pretty decently well-known studio engineers that became producers. And so that was actually starting to pay the bills. And then this is around 2000, 2001. That's when Napster hits. I know for a lot of listeners,
Hmm.
Napster predates them, but that's when all the music went online. And the music business freaked out because historically CD sales have been huge and they've been going up. Every year they had gone up. But then when everything went on Napster and people could get it for free, which actually, it's kind of a precursor to crypto, right? To
Right.
decentralized blockchain technology, because everybody contributes their computers
Hmm.
to share data. And that's what happened. And so the guys that were actually able to pay me, that had recording budgets so they could get hired and pay me, kind of dried up. And so that was right around the time I had my first kid. My wife's from the Midwest. She wanted to move back and ended up in Chicago. Chicago's my happy medium. I'd been out in LA. And I didn't, I thought, I love Chicago. I had a lot of friends back there all the time. And that's how I end up going back to Chicago. And that's when I got into litigation,
Hmm.
commercial litigation, like at a bigger law firm.
One of the things that's interesting when you mention Napster is probably seeing the patterns over a long period of time when there are changes in the industry, that something that we take for granted changes overnight, like the way the music was bought and listened and produced. When you think about that observation back in those days of Napster and what it did to the music industry, how are you thinking differently about what's going on with AA right now in the legal space?
Again, I don't know. I never really thought about it. I get, I will say the parallels are there's a lot of unknowns. It's not happened yet. Like the interesting thing that I'd probably say in retrospect, I will say, I guess because it's more consumer facing, record sales dried up, like not overnight, but it was quickly. Now, whether legal bills, whether clients of attorneys are going to stop paying their attorneys overnight, probably not going to happen. It's not happened yet, but it
Hmm.
is a huge disruption at the way, obviously, the way music was getting delivered there to go Napster, and now potentially could be a disruption to the way legal services are delivered. Right? I mean,
Hmm.
either your attorney's using it to get himself halfway there, where he would rely on an associate or something before, or what I think will happen in certain areas of the law, and we've already seen it, is people will forego attorneys at all and just kind of figure it out on their own and go to court. Whether that's good or bad, I don't know. I personally think in some ways it's good because they don't have any help now, right?
Hmm.
And if AI, it's getting better. Still, I think it's really good at legal, but it's got a long ways to go. But I guess it might be better for some judges that actually the pro se, the self represented litigants come to court and have some arguments, at least some well formed arguments they may not have had before without the help of AI. But then again, I don't know. Judges might tell you differently.
Do you think that other lawyers have a means to future-proof themselves against that? With your changes in your career, I'm assuming you were able to build a network, and that was probably part of the equation that really helped you when you moved back to the Chicago. Were there any other actions that you thought about what you did back then that might be applicable to the
The
landscape
network
today?
network is the most important thing for your career. When I moved to LA, I literally didn't know a soul. I moved in with my law school roommates, college friends, and I didn't know them. I met them the night I showed up. I knew no one, so I had to network and do all that there. But then, I quickly learned that your network is everything. I know sometimes it might be uncomfortable if you're introverted, but you just got to go out and meet people. So that, without question, is very important. But how to future proof? Well, and going back to the future proof question, that never goes out of
Mm.
style, right? Networking is never not going to be helpful. To future proof, you got to stay up on tech. I think for the longest time, obviously, you and I are legal tech people. I've been harping on it for many years. It's important for a lawyer to understand tech on many levels, not only how it can help he or she do their job, which is what I think a lot of legal tech has been focused on to date, but also how it's being used by their customers.
Mm.
But to future proof yourself now, you got, I mean, this sounds so everybody's talking about it. You got to at least understand how AI works, how these large language models work, and how it can help you get across, help you get across the finish line. Like if your firm is going to cut down on hiring associates, you don't have that luxury of help anymore. So you've got to understand how to use the tech too. So I know it
Mm.
sounds, cliche, but to future proof yourself, you've really got to get on this train. And going back to the point I just made before, where historically I think legal technology has been, um, how do you deliver these services? Now it's actually doing some of the work before, right? Like when you had What's to start from the early days? This Nexus and Westlaw.
Right.
That's just case law research, right? But the attorney still had to do it, and it wasn't doing that work for you. Now it does. You say, hey, I got
Mm.
this case in California, and it involves a non-compete, and what's the statutory regulation on that? And you just ask that question, and it happens. So you just, and to get ahead, you've got to be the best you can at dealing at working with these pieces of technology.
Do you think that technology also, going back to your move to Chicago, going into the litigation as well, and thinking about the new technology maybe at that time, with the tools available right now, do you think that the standard billable hours model no longer works, that there has to be a different commercial relationship between the clients and how the work is done?
Billable hour, man. That half of the reason that we've been able to build this company is the exorbitant cost of billable hours. So first things first, it's not going to go away until the clients demand that it goes away. I think thankfully, not thankfully, I shouldn't harm it. Billable hours serves a purpose, a very important purpose for certain types of legal work. But I think now, because literally there's probably no type of law exempt from it, except maybe going to court, right? Litigation, or like you're face to face in a deal, right? Pretty much most other areas of law are susceptible to a reduction in the number of hours it takes to get something done. So I think clients are going to finally start demanding it. And I think what will happen is probably a lot of flat fee based stuff, which I think is important too, because what a lawyer adds to something isn't just the time spent. It might be, let's say he's a really good negotiator and he's able to figure out some language that needs to go in a contract that the person next door doesn't think of. That takes that guy 5 minutes, but yet it might cut down on hundreds of hours of negotiation and the legal fees. So there is important. I think that the flat fees are going to finally come around, which we've been working on flat. Some stuff we do has been flat fee forever.
I read an article just earlier today from my fellow colleague in the marketing world, and it was an interesting take on the relationship between agencies and clients. And I wonder how you think it might be applicable to the legal relationship as well. And the article basically argued that a lot of agency work historically was the what work. So there was a deliverable that had to be done, and agency operated because it was more efficient for the agency to do the what than it would be for the client. But now with AI, it's shifting towards the why. It's shifting towards that strategy, because the operations wise, somebody can figure it out how to do it. And AI keeps changing the way we do business, and it will only get probably faster and better over time for the things that it's not doing yet. But that why point is becoming increasingly important. And if I'm understanding your point correctly, somebody that knows how to negotiate or bring points should not be punished for doing it quickly, because the savings could be
Right.
absolutely different. So it's more of a strategic relationship and pointing the client towards the right way that becomes fundamental for success.
Right. No, I agree. Yeah. But how do you price it? I don't know. It's value based, but how do you put a number on that? And it's always been there, right? But with the nature of legal work, there was still a lot of billable hours involved to get you there. But nowadays, that may not be the case anymore. Like,
Mm-hmm.
for instance, going back to the point of, well, all right, this attorney knows that if we put this clause in the contract, it's going to save us a lot of time and money, and another attorney doesn't. Or let's say you're in litigation and you immediately read the legal arguments that the other side has given you, and you get it and you figure out how to respond to it more quickly than the next guy. That does save money, but I don't know. It's just, I think that there's a different level of how we're going to be, how we're going to have to bill. And I think they're even going to that point about the relationship, the expertise. I think that's another way to future proof yourself as a lawyer is, I don't think any industry is going to be immune to regulatory aspects of the impact of AI, right? So stay ahead of that. Like, the tech, like there's all kinds of regulations that are starting to be formed to apply to AI, especially over in Europe. Get ahead of that curve. Like, that's another way to future proof yourself. There's going to be more
Mm-hmm.
laws. There's definitely going to be more laws.
What do you think on the relationship between proactive and reactive work? Because for somebody outside, it might seem that a lot of lawyers only get involved with their clients when something happened and they need to react to it. And one of the value adds potentially could be, and I think this is where flat fee structure and AI could also, have a good space, strategically suggesting some things to even mitigate an issue from arising by having that relationship where a client comes and have a conversation about something before an issue takes place in the first place.
Well, that's been a complaint of for clients forever, especially corporate clients, where what's the number one complaint? Well, my lawyer doesn't really understand my business.
Mm.
And why is that? I mean, probably because they're being reactive. Hey, we got this lawsuit. We got to defend it. Hey, we're about to close this deal. We got to negotiate it, you know? And they're not taking the time to take a step forward. But what this isn't anything new, but maybe it's actually easier with AI now. It's a lot easier to do research. You know, get ahead of that. Like, look at your client's business, you know, see, like, how can we proactively, going back to the AI example, maybe there's something, maybe they're a tech company and they've built an AI component. Go and tell them, hey, you're building out this chatbot, but you know, there's some regulatory components you need to be aware of.
I don't know if you followed, again, in the marketing space, it's been all over. The first AI company, I think, with two people with the medical sales and how
I
that...
read that. Oh, yeah. Is the company down there in Southern California?
I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that. It was in the Wall Street Journal. I read that article. I thought that was so interesting. But the interesting thing about that was everybody says, well, AI is going to free up your time. That dude was working 48 hours a day, he said, basically. But I thought that was really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think it's also a good example when AI can accelerate certain things. But again, you need to have a strategic partner to look at the compliance, to look at how everything is done, because things can happen faster and you can have tremendous sales. But if the underlying, the regulations and procedures below that are not looked after, it is an issue that will happen later. Yep. And the fallout of that could be catastrophic for the company.
Agreed. Yeah, no, that's again, that's a way to future-proof yourself. Like, look at whatever your area of law is, and you just see like how AI is going to impact it, not from a workflow level, but does it impact whatever you're doing? You know, are there going to be more laws? Are there going to be more rules? No, that's probably more commercial based than other types of law, the consumer-facing law, but it's something which probably the consumer-facing laws, other than the actual work itself, is probably not going to be as hit immediately than the more enterprise-based law. But again, going back to the consumer law and how to future-proof yourself, use AI to cut down on people you have to hire, your bookkeeping, your intake. Like, there's some great apps out there that'll help you. It will answer your call. It has an AI voice, ask questions like a chatbot on steroid. But the cool thing about it is it'll kind of vet the person, inquiring about your services, where before you would have had an answering service. They may not have been legally trained. They just took down the name and number and you had to call them back. Now there's many, I think the back office functions of any industry, but especially legal work, is one of the best places to start with artificial intelligence.
Absolutely. And one of the things when we were talking earlier before recording is that human in the loop concept, that a lot of those workflows, whether it's intake or something else, could be improved with AI, but at the same time, having a human there to make sure the system works and somebody can step in is quite important. So maybe you want to just expand on how you see the importance of that.
Oh, yeah, no. So our whole company is built on this. It always has been, even before the LLMs and stuff. Tech is cool. Tech's, we want you to use tech. Tech's a head start. You need to use the right tech for the job, but the results have to be verified by a human, especially in the legal world, right? And this has always been the case, and this can't be overlooked now. And you read about all these, guys that go to court and they didn't check their, their cites in the brief, and their fake cases, and even now you get court opinions doing this. The legal ethics rules haven't changed. You were still obligated to check the output. Like, no one would ever just like, do a Westlaw search, not read the case to see if it stood for the proposition you were saying it did, and submit the brief. So yeah, no, you always need a human in the loop. Nothing has ever changed. And another thing that, like I said, we based our business on this is, here's another thing too. AI tools are really cool. They can save you time, but you still need humans to run them. So even if, let's say you have 30 projects and AI can only, can help you knock that down to 15, like, you still might need help with the 15. So there's like two layers to this, I say tech is cool, but you still need people on a bunch of different levels.
Absolutely. And then talking about how you use it right now. So do you want to elaborate a little bit about the Percipient and how the business came about and what the company does today?
Yeah, sure. So as a longtime litigator, as mentioned before, I did that for about 10 years. I did the music business for about 10 years, and litigation for about 10 years. And then I just got burned out on big firm life. The billable hour. Go back to the billable hour. It's tedious. Everybody hates it. The clients hate it. The lawyers hate, keeping track of it. I mean, they like their paydays but it's a real pain in the butt. So I just, going back to the entrepreneurial spirit, firm life wasn't for me. And so what was happening was this. So this is early the first decade of 2000s. This is when electronic discovery just started to happen.
Hmm.
Because of the nature of my cases, I had that component where evidence was electronic now because it was businesses suing businesses. So it was emails, Office documents, Microsoft 365 documents, or what it wasn't called at the time.
Hmm.
So that evidence wasn't paper. So not only was I having to prepare for depositions, get ready for trial, I also had to figure out, how do we get through this? This isn't a banker's box of documents anymore. It's the equivalent of a whole, storage unit. Because I've always been a tech guy, I've always liked tech. I kind of like doing that. I figured it out. I was able to figure out what the vendors, what softwares to use. And so after about 5 years of doing this, I figured out, there's a lot of this work that probably shouldn't be done by a law firm for a bunch of different levels. It's, the law firm pricing structure is not the way to price this out. Number two is, if you're really going to do tech right in any industry, you need to be good at the tech. You need to understand how to use it. And if you're a lawyer that just uses a piece of tech, twice a month, you're not going to be, you're not going to have that expertise. So I started thinking about it. And that's when I launched the company. At the time, our main focus was large scale document reviews, managed document review, and big commercial litigation projects. But over time, that's morphed into other stuff that we do now. But the workflow has always been the same. You have a legal project with a lot of data that you need both people and technology to push out an output, a deliverable, and it's verified by the human at the other end. So, like for instance, we obviously moved into due diligence and M&A deals. It's a similar concept to these document reviews. Now even before the LLMs, we started to build out the app. We offer AI augmented contract review, where the AI takes the first pass, but we have humans too. The humans check the outputs, fix it, and then send it back to the customer before it's done. We also offer subpoena compliance. So if you want to outboard that, we have AI takes the first pass at taking a look at the subpoena, identify any objections. It creates a document. You need the response document, and then we push it out the back door. But the human again has to take a look at it. So going back full circle, the process is the same. We have technology that takes a first pass, but humans vet it at the end, and we push it out. We push it out the deliverable to whomever it's going to, either the attorneys that are clients, or in this case subpoenas, the requesting parties.
So basically, you look at the whole value chain of the process, and you see what should the firm be doing, where the specialty can be delegated, and then within that, what's the part for the technology, what's the part with the human in the loop, and then you create efficiencies around that.
Right.
Creating that ecosystem. I think that's a very smart approach, and it's definitely making it possible to improve things much faster than firms might be doing by themselves. Within those, when you see those different opportunities, because with new case studies, the use cases, there is always that fear of missing out, that maybe there's a new LLM model is coming out, or a new application that somebody else is doing. For you right now, how do you decide what to focus on so that you're not just following the hype, but you're focusing on the best use of the time and resources that you have in the company?
Well, it hasn't really changed. I mean, we always use the right tech for the job. Interestingly about the AI, the LLMs, is things are happening so fast. I don't even know if people have time for FOMO, but just understanding how it works, knowing that, hey, something here today is not going to be here tomorrow. I mean, we've never really lost focus on, we are good at doing volume legal work that needs legal expertise, but isn't the best use of our clients' and customers' time. That's never, the focus has never changed, and it will not. So historically, like if we might have needed 20 people to do something, now with tech and AI, we need 5 to 10. So what we focus on has never really changed, nor do I think it should. Going back to our whole future-proof conversation about staying ahead of regulations, obviously we stay up on those, but we're never going to advise people on that. Like we focus on, like I said, the volume tasks. Maybe some of this, maybe there's more areas out there that just we don't see yet, where it's volume and AI can take care of it. But we're always keep our ear to the ground, but we try to stay focused on our core values and what we're best at.
Are you familiar with the concept that, again, online is starting to pick up in popularity, but we had a couple of decades where software as a service was one of the most valuable business models you could build. And right now with the AI, the script is getting flipped, and people are talking about services as the software. So basically providing the service, but having that software element for the company that's actually doing the work. Do you see that as a trend and as the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think it will be. I'm not sure how In legal, I'm gonna focus here on legal. I believe
Hmm.
that it's going to impact software for sure, because anybody that's tech savvy is going to vibe code or do whatever. But well, let's start there. People can vibe code. They can create something that kind of scratches their itch. But are they going to make a whole platform? Are they going to make Google again? No, they're not. And if they're going to, they still need software developers. And the reason I say that, in the tools that we build in house, all of our developers use AI. But again, sometimes when the code comes out, it's there's a lot of superfluous stuff. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't quite fit. So I think that, like, really either B2C software that has a daily use case that's really sophisticated, and B2B software, is it going to be easier to develop this stuff? Sure. You still need software developers. Now, going back to your question about whether or not service with software is going to be the thing versus software as a service. So the thing that first comes to mind when you say that in legal is the legal quant group, right? The
Hmm.
legal quants they've modeled themselves after Jane Street, which is in the financial world, who just use algorithms. They use computer code to make the best investments. And the argument these legal quants is, and I believe it's true, is, instead of paying for Harvey Lagora, we can do a lot of this stuff ourselves, because maybe those tools have features we don't need, but we can develop the stuff that is really good for us and really customized to us, because we have the AI development assistance to do that now. Now, this still takes a huge level of technical expertise that I don't know the average lawyer is going to want to develop.
Hmm.
It takes an interest in it too, As long as I've been in the legal career, even, we worked we have a lot of legal interns here from the law school in town, and the ones that come to work for us are very forward thinking. But I talk to them all the time. It's still a very conservative group of people. So I think if given, like, all right, I need to learn XYZ law versus XYZ how to code, I think that just by default, in the nature of the people that gravitate towards law school, I just don't know that's going to happen at the legal level. Do I think a lot of people will develop tools, here and there to help them? Yeah, I do. I think it's going to take over the legal world? No. I mean, could there
Hmm.
be a law firm? Go back to your example of that company that was selling the pharmaceuticals and stuff. That was that small marketing company. Yeah, could that happen? Is it happening? Yeah.
Hmm.
Do I think that's going to be the rule? I don't know. I doubt it. I still think that as a people, lawyers are just too conservative. And yeah, that's the thing too, is there's only so many hours in a day. Should you learn the law or should you use coding? I don't know. It's up to them to decide.
Everybody gets 24 hours, and with so many changes, there are only so many things that individuals can
Yep.
focus on. Chad, with going through the years of decades of the experience you had, music industry, litigation, with what you're doing with technology right now, how did your hiring approach change? So when you are getting people on board, is there different behaviors that you're looking for? Are you looking for expertise or curiosity to learn the new technology? What's become your go-to standard when you're interviewing now?
Curiosity. It's got and self-motivation. A lot of times when we've hired people that are now in managerial roles and higher roles, project management roles, they weren't tech savvy. I mean, they got to know how to run a computer when they first start with us, because even the entry level jobs, you've got to be good at software. But
Hmm.
no, the number one thing to look for in a hire, and I don't care what position it is curiosity. Otherwise, they're not going to excel. They're just going to punch the clock. That's you know, if you would have talked to me 10, 15 years ago when I would interview people even at the law firm and stuff, would have curiosity been one of the things I look for? No. Now it 100% is. 100% is.
I also want to talk about the growing businesses because again, you had exposure through different industries and you work in different markets across America. One of the things that was very interesting is that you built your own podcast, and I love to hear sort of your take on what was the decision initially to start that and what were the upsides that you've seen once that was in action.
Well, so obviously, I think the first thing to do was get the name out, right? But obviously, it's marketing purpose. Now, what I thought was going to happen was, hey, someone's going to call me up, go, Chad, I love your podcast. You're a genius. You're hired. Never happened. But, I guess I kind of thought I was going to, but that wasn't the whole reason. That was, we'll say, even if it was 50-50. The other 50 was I really wanted to learn about any aspect of the law. And that's another thing is, why has no one ever called me and said, hey, you're hired because I love your podcast? Probably because we rarely directly focus on what we do. It's not just legal tech. It's the thing I always say, it's about the impact tech is having on the law. So I'm a big blockchain guy. We got on that train early. Or I'll have professors that are talking about, what liability should AI companies have when it goes rogue. That it was to learn. I mean, that was the real motivating force, and to get me to be able to meet people that I wouldn't have otherwise been able to meet probably without saying, "Hey, come on the podcast." Now, has it opened doors? Absolutely, absolutely. Like, is it easy for me now to reach out to people, and now that it kind of relates to the business, and I need to talk to them, bounce an idea off them? Absolutely. So the things I tell people when they want to go into a podcast, number one, it's going to take a hell of a lot longer than you think it is. Number two is you got to stick with it. I mean, the average podcast, Wendy, you know just good as I, like, what is there, 5 episodes and they're done? And then number three, you can't expect, unless you have a certain type of podcast, that is the phone's going to start ringing off the hook for you to get hired just based on your charisma on a podcast. It's you got to be curious. Going back to curious, you got to want to do it, and you got to have. There's different metrics you want to track, right? Again, I can't emphasize enough, though. It takes longer than you think.
It's always interesting to talk to founders of the businesses, very successful businesses. And the common thread is usually one of the things they say is that if we knew how long it will take and how hard it will be at the very beginning, we probably would have never done it.
Right.
But sometimes you need that uninformed optimism to get started and to get going, have that curiosity, have the conversation.
Well, that's true. Going back to the entrepreneurial stuff we've been talking about. Yeah, I think that either being ignorant or naive, those are some of the most important attributes you need, because if you realize how hard it's going to be, the rational you is not going to do it. It's just not going to do it.
I also think right now podcasting and the firms and the companies that are doing it, they will be at advantage going forward, because one of the exciting things in the space of AI is that YouTube is having enormous weight, as well as some other platforms, for taking the transcript and citing somebody as an authority. Mm-hmm. And there will be a big moat between businesses that took the time to produce the content and to have their opinions and the businesses that don't. And as we see the trend from traditionally, even in B2B, doing the searches and then educating by clicking on links and going to sites, more so people rely on what ChatGPT or other LLMs are telling them. And having that body of work, content and conversations will help businesses to actually enter those conversations from that angle.
Right, because if they can't find you on the web, then the LLMs aren't exist. Either, so yeah.
Yeah, precisely. Chad, what have been other levers of growth for you when you started the business to get the right type of customers for you?
Well, going back to the thing I said earlier, network. I mean, it's, legal is still a relationship-driven business. Obviously, a lot more decisions are made for enterprise customers by procurement stuff. It comes down to numbers. But again, it's credibility and building a network. I can't emphasize that enough. And it doesn't even... Building a network might not have anything to do with you getting a new client or building a business. It might help you get a job, so that has been a big lever. Obviously, referrals from adjacent partners. We work with some, we build a lot of our own software, but we're not going to reinvent the wheel. If a piece of software is already out there that we can use, we're going to pay for it. And we develop good relationship with them, and they'll refer us business from time to time. And then obviously the old SEO, the old web, that's the other thing you got to do. And especially go back to now GEO or whatever you want to call it. You do need a presence out there, because if you, to your point, like we do it every day, like you ask Claude, hey, I need to get a cleaner for my pool. Where does Claude go? For now, at least, it's going like searching the web, it's just going taking a deep dive. So you gotta be out there. You gotta put your information out there.
You have to exist online to matter. Going back to your point about networking and getting referrals, what do you think maybe younger lawyers get wrong about networking in the way they approach it that they should change?
Not starting. You just got to start. Yeah, is it uncomfortable to go to a happy hour where you don't know anybody there and strike up a conversation? Yeah, it's totally hard, but yeah, it's not effortless, right? Unless it comes from some family where people are trying to get to you before you get to them. I mean, you're going to have to do guys like me, average Joe, you had to go out and then do all this ourselves. You got to start. That's the hardest thing to do. You just got to start. But once you start up a conversation with someone, they're not going to say, hey, gross, and run off. They're going to, we're all humans, and you usually have a good conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think on the other side of the spectrum? What do you think are the marketing strategies that law firms use, and maybe something you see in litigation that a lot of lawyers invest their time and effort in, but that's something that should be probably left in the past because it's not as effective as people think.
Yeah, it's interesting because going back to the point, I think a lot of the stuff that still was important is important. Obviously on the consumer side, that's Google Ads, things
Mm.
of that nature. I think that still works. But again, to your point, well, maybe less so, right? Google Ads at some point, unless people start selling ads in LLM, which I think OpenAI has hinted they're going to. So maybe where you're doing the ads, that might be something that is becoming obsolete. But going now, either side, enterprise law or people law, the thought leadership, I think is going to become even more important
Mm.
because there's a lot of AI schlock, right? It sounds good, probably mostly accurate, but it's shallow. I think that the deep actual thought leadership will be important. But I think what will be important is you can't just throw it out there and hope it sticks. You're going to really have to push it and get behind it. So I think that whether that's more important now than it was back, 5 years ago, I don't know because you always should have been behind it. Might be, might be with the whole thing we've been talking about where people rely on AI to do their research for them more than SEO.
I think that's a very interesting trend that we are seeing that, when everybody zigs, you have to zag. And it is easier than ever to put AI slop out there and produce the volume of content that doesn't resonate because
Yep.
it sounds like just everything mixed together. It sounds like an average thought. It doesn't have the
Yep.
personality. And we see that with big tech companies that instead of brand promotion, they increasingly put in the brand behind their CEOs and other individuals within the business building their personal brands because ultimately back to the networking as well, people want to do business with other people. And I think that's what we will continue seeing in the future as well.
So are you saying to counteract the AI schlop, what we'll call it, that you're seeing a trend in marketing where we're putting a face with a name.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, coincidentally, I just read in the Wall Street Journal this morning. There was an article about how Burger King put their CEO front and center, but
Mm-hmm.
he was reluctant to at first. Are you saying that's a response to the fact that AI and content could be so easily created now, and it's just not as deep?
That's exactly what we are seeing, that the more companies should put the actual people in front of the camera, and it should be humans, not brands. And within that, it should be authentic thoughts and opinion pieces. And it's better to have a polarizing opinion than not to have an opinion in the first place. I think just like with niche and down, and that's another question that I'd like to ask you as well, many firms, they try to be generalist. Even within a specialty of law, they don't try to pick the best type of client to work with or the case to work with. They try to be generalist because they think they will have more opportunities. But more often than not, we see the opposite to be true. If somebody says, this is who I work with and this is not who I work with, actually their business tends to be more streamlined and they're attracting more of the right clients. And when it comes to opinion, it's just, again, highlighting the same point. In practice, the way that you build your businesses, have you observed the similar phenomenon?
No, it's always good to have a niche because it gives you an advantage. I'll give you an example. So one of our customers is a pretty big insurance brokerage here in America. I mean, just doing that stuff day in and day out, we know the legal issues. So instead of like searching for the needle in a haystack, we know right where to go. So I think there's always
Mm-hmm.
that help. But as you were asking that question, niche has always been important. I think again, if we were spending our time and I think doing analysis, you probably to the extent you can, a niche is probably important. But as you were saying that, I started thinking, if AI can get us 80% of the way there, for a lot of legal work, 80% is fine. But if you want to
Mm-hmm.
future proof yourself, maybe niche is more important, right? Because you're so good at this area of law. The more arcane, the better, because AI is not going to be able to answer these questions. So, yeah, I think
Mm-hmm.
niche is maybe potentially, I think to your question, I think it could be probably more important.
Chad, when you think about the goals you have for the rest of the year, what's the North Star for you? What is that one thing that you're working to achieve this year?
Grow the business. Now we've got some AI related offerings that relate to legal work, but they're a little different angles. So we're working on that. But yeah, grow the business is always is a goal.
That's always a good goal. I know a lot of legal businesses and law firms, they like the maintenance stage of having a good lifestyle business and building everything around the managing partner, which is to many lawyers is a good place to be. But when it comes to technology, I think you either grow or you get replaced. So I think that's probably the challenge.
Agreed. But if you want, there's nothing wrong with the lifestyle business. I wish I had it in me to chill out a little bit and go with that. But nowadays with all these tools, you could maybe it's more achievable to do that lifestyle business, right? Where if you want to, let's say you've been a law firm lawyer at a big firm all your life, and you're reluctant to throw your own shingle out because you have to hire, 3 or 4 people. Maybe you don't have to do that anymore. Maybe it's more accessible now that you can get out. And maybe that's what happens with law, right? Where not as much stuff is going to the big firms and it's going to the smaller firms. But I think that's probably been happening for a while in certain areas. But yeah.
I think one of the interesting common patterns as well that I noticed in the conversations we've been having on the Growth Switch is that the mid-sized law firm and in other industries, mid-sized businesses as well, disappearing as a species. You either have a big law and private equity growing firms very aggressively, or you have those small lifestyle businesses and lifestyle law firms that are centered around the managing partner, and they do well at that level, but the middle ground is sort of going away.
Maybe, but to the extent that the people that were working in the middle start their own businesses and stuff, maybe it's not a bad thing. I mean, so let's talk about, actually, that's another answer. Let's talk about law. Why do you hire the big firms? Because they can throw armies of lawyers at a problem that might be the bet the company type of problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you don't need as many lawyers anymore. So maybe where historically in 2005, you needed Kirkland & Ellis to do something, where maybe you can have a 10-person law firm do this because they have access to all this information that's in the LLMs, and the AI to get the work done. I don't know. I don't know if that's a bad thing. I don't really have a strong opinion on it.
Makes sense. Chad, where can our listeners learn more about the work that you do and maybe take the next step if they have something that you can help them with?
Yeah, sure. So go percipient.co, not com. That's a whole different story. .com. That's another thing I give. When you start your business, get a .com. It's been a thorn in our side for a long time. It's percipient.co. The podcast is tlpodcast.com. But if you just search Technically Legal, it'll come up. And then LinkedIn. If you want to talk to me personally, just get me on LinkedIn.
Perfect. We'll make sure to include the links so our listeners can find you. Chad, thank you so much for coming today. It's been great having you with us.
Alex, appreciate it. I really appreciate your time. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you.